everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have decided to film Elodie's birth story. So full disclosure, I had gotten like 5 minutes into this video and realized I never hit record. So let's start over. Alright, so what I was saying in the other video was that this video is going to be pretty relaxed. Elodie is playing on the floor. I'm probably going to have to pick her up in a minute, but if you hear toys and whatnot in the background, that's what's going on. I figured that I would do this video because I wanted to document this story because I know it seems like it was a long time ago now, but I know in a couple of years, I'm going to be like 6 months ago, that was nothing. So I wanted to be able to document this while it's still sort of fresh in my mind before I forget any more details because it's already getting a little hazy, which is kind of sad actually. And I figured that because we are overseas in England, a lot of our friends and family probably haven't even heard the whole birth story. And if they have, it's probably been like bits and pieces chopped up, and they probably did not hear from Ben or I, who obviously we were people who were there, so we could tell it accurately. I will say that Ben and I were the only ones. Okay, obviously I was the one in the room. That's stupid of me to say. But Ben was the only other person in the room with me besides the mandatory people, the doctors, the nurses, the techs, all that. So it was just us two. So we've obviously had to retell this story many of times to people who have wanted to hear and talk to us. Like I said, it's going to be a very relaxed video because Elodie is just playing and enjoying herself in the background. So anyways, without going on any longer in this introduction, I want to jump right into this birth story. I do have notes written down on my phone just so I don't skip over anything or forget anything important that I want to say. So on Tuesday, May 29th, I was going to bed. It was just a normal day, and I went to the restroom one more time before I got into bed, and when I wiped myself, I noticed that something odd had come off onto the toilet paper. I'm sorry if this is TMI, but guys, this is a birth story, so what do you expect? So I looked in the toilet and I thought I saw a mucus plug. Elodie is my first child, so I didn't know for sure, but from things I've heard from other moms and things I have looked up. Do you want to say hi? Alright, you can sit up here with me. Alright, so from other things that I have heard, it appeared to me to be a mucus plug. So I told Ben, I was like, you know, that could mean nothing though, because I've heard people, women lose their mucus plug and not go into labor for days or weeks. Of course, I was in my mind like silently hoping that it would mean something, but I didn't know for sure, and so I just went to bed. That next morning, it was Wednesday, Ben was actually off of work, and we had some errands to do on our to-do list. We had to actually go get a rental car on this specific day because Ben's car actually got rear-ended while it was parked in a parking lot on base. So we had to go sort through all of that. Well, we were leaving the house around... Alright. So we were leaving the house around 9 a.m. and I remember walking around our bedroom and I had some very, very light cramping. Like really nothing at all, but I was just telling Ben, like, this is kind of weird that I have really light cramping. I've never really had this before recently. And so I really honestly didn't think much of it. And Ben didn't think much of it either, I don't think. So we ended up going to base, getting a rental car, and while we were in the rental car, I remember thinking like, this is getting a bit more. It was still not bad cramping whatsoever, but it was just becoming a little bit more intense. And like I said, when I say intense, I don't mean bad. It was just, you know, picking up pace. So by the time we got back to base to run our errands in the rental car, it had picked up a little bit, the cramping. And so I told Ben, I was like, I don't know, this is just kind of odd between possibly losing my mucus plug the night before and now cramping a little bit all morning long. I think we should try and get the errands that we need to do on base done quickly, and then we should maybe head home. I had like a list packed. I had pretty much all of our bags packed, but of course there's still like a couple things we wanted to throw in right before we would leave for the hospital. We ended up getting some food, I remember, at Burger King on base. and we rushed home, and the cramping just continued. All right, so it was probably, I don't know the exact times, I kind of forget now, but it was probably somewhere between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. Sorry guys, like I said, this is gonna be a very relaxed video. Between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. the cramping continued and contractions seemed to start coming. During that time, I decided to eat something, to shower, to do my hair, to finish getting the bags ready. I don't think I fully thought I was in labor at this point still, just because I didn't want to get too excited, but I was like, okay, well, if nothing else, we'll at least just have everything ready. I'll be showered, I'll feel good, and we can just kind of plan for it. So Ben got the list and he started checking things off. The contractions were definitely picking up, so I remember sitting on the floor doing my makeup in front of a mirror in our dressing room, and I was like, okay, these contractions are definitely getting a bit more. I was having to stop a little bit here and there, so Ben was getting super excited. I remember seeing him run around the house trying to get the last things together off my list, and he was so excited, like he could not concentrate. It was the cutest thing. So then got to about 5 p.m. We had waited for a little while, and then I decided like we should go in. So I remember eating, not bananas, I'm sorry, apples and peanut butter before we went in. That's just what sounded good. I sat on the couch, Ben brought everything to the car, and they really started picking up then. So I was like, okay, let's go in, let's at least get checked. You know, there's no harm in doing that. So we got to the hospital, we went through the door, and there was a couple people behind us. I just went up to the front desk, and I remember standing there and I was like, I told Ben, I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to say in this situation. How? And I said, well, excuse me, I think I'm in labor. And they were probably like, yeah, right, lady. If you're still standing up and you look fine, you're not in labor. But that's what I said. They ended up triaging me and checking me. And at that time, I was 4 centimeters dilated. So, and I remember actually standing at the desk when I told them I felt like I was in labor. The people behind us were like, wait, you're in labor? And I said, well, I think so. And she goes, you don't even look like you could be due yet, because throughout my whole pregnancy, I got a belly for sure, but it wasn't huge by any means. So I will always remember that lady, because she was like, oh my gosh, how are you 38, almost 39 weeks along? So that's kind of just a funny memory for me. So we ended up getting triage checked. I was 4 centimeters dilated. Contractions were definitely picking up. Definitely starting to hurt a little bit. If y'all don't know, I did deliver on a military base at a military hospital in the UK. So my husband is currently stationed here with the US military, and their rule of thumb, which I'm sure this is like other hospitals, even off base, but they don't admit you until you're 6 centimeters dilated at least. Well, I've heard horror stories, okay, maybe not horror stories, but I've heard stories where they admit you too late, and then they tell you that you don't have enough time to get an epidural. I had decided that I did want an epidural, and so I was nervous that if I did not stay persistent with it, that they would end up admitting me late, because I was already 4 centimeters dilated, and I don't really think it took much to get 4 centimeters dilated, because the pain honestly wasn't that bad to be almost halfway. But I wanted the epidural. I knew the pain was going to get bad. So I decided to stay persistent, and I told them, like, I want an epidural. Can you guys admit me? They were like, no, how about you go walk the track? So I was like, okay, that's fine. It's not terrible right now. So I got dressed again. Ben and I decided to stop at the Shopette on base, and I got I think it was a cookies and cream Freel smoothie from the Shopette. I think Ben maybe got a drink or a snack also. And I remember when we were in the Shopette, I had to stop every couple minutes, probably every minute and a half. No, it was probably honestly less. Every minute I had to stop and stand there. I could not walk when the contraction came on. I just stood there and I breathed. So we got back into the car. We were still going to go to the track. Well, when we got to the track, which was seriously 2 seconds down the road, our base is not that big. So when I say that we went from the hospital to the Shopette to the track, it was really like a 2-second drive to each different place. So when we got there, I was like, Ben, I cannot get out of this car. So he said, okay, well, let's just sit here because the doctor had told me I should not come back for an hour to 2 hours. So I was like, okay. So I sat there and they just kept getting worse and worse to the point where I was just like squeezing Ben's hand. I was trying to lay down in the seat. I was uncomfortable being in the car. So I was like, Ben, it's been, I think at that point it was like an hour. Or maybe it was an hour and a half. And I was like, we gotta go back. Let's go back. Like, I don't know what's going on down here. This is my first baby. I don't know how intense this is supposed to be, but like, we just need to go back. All right, so we went back to the hospital, which again, it's like 2 seconds down the road. It was about 7:30 at this point at night. And they checked me again and they said, okay, you're about 5 centimeters. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going a little bit slower. I was like, can I please have an epidural? Like, I'm almost at 6. Can you just please admit me? And they wouldn't. So because I was begging for an epidural so much, and again, I was so persistent about this because I have heard so many other women have to deliver on base naturally, not by choice, but just because they waited too long. And I did not want that to be me. I didn't want to be backed into a corner and not have that option. I decided to beg for an epidural, and they ended up giving me pain meds through an IV. The IV took like 10 different tries. Military doctors for you, telling you what. So my arms like have never been so bruised in my life from an IV. Super, super bruised. It looks like someone beat my arms or I beat my arms myself. I don't know. It was terrible. But we finally got it in. They gave me the pain meds through the IV and it made me very drowsy. So I ended up just sleeping in the triage area. Ben was in the chair next to me. Of course, he was with me throughout the entire thing. I feel really bad for him because it was probably super uncomfortable. But I was still awake. Like, I knew when the contractions were coming on. They were still pretty intense, but I could rest a little bit. All right, so then I was in triage for the next few hours. About midnight, 1 a.m. It all starts to get fuzzy at this point. The pain meds they gave me did make me a bit drowsy and just kind of out of it. So I remember them checking me and saying that I think I was a 6. So they were going to move me to a room now. So I remember getting up, moving to a room, and then Ben actually had to go home to check on our dog Stella, because we at this point, we had been at this base for almost a year and we just didn't really know many people. We didn't really know who to ask to go home and check on our pup for us. So we live about 30 minutes from base, so Ben had to go all the way home, check on Stella real quick, and then come all the way back and hope that nothing happened between that time. So that was a little nerve-wracking. He like sped home and tried to let her out real quick. Stella was a trooper throughout this whole thing. She is such a good dog. She really was just a trooper because it was a little hard, definitely. So he probably got back about an hour and a half later. So it was the middle of the night. I remember then just getting at the epidural. This is like, I don't know the exact times now. I know it was like middle of the night. It really started to get fuzzy. I would have to ask Ben for the exact details here. He probably know better. Maybe at some point he'll do his version of this story because I don't want to speak for him. But I did get an epidural and Ben was there, and I remember being super out of it. At this point, I sat up in bed and I told Ben, I'm gonna puke. Like, get me a bucket. So I almost threw up on him. He got me a bucket in time and I was puking into the bucket while I was getting the epidural. So I got the epidural and I was then able to rest a little bit more. I think I like barely remember the doctor coming in and saying that she was gonna break my water because my water had not broken at this point. I think it was around 6 a.m. So she broke my water. And then about an hour later, a nurse came to check on me and they said I was 10 centimeters dilated. I started pushing at about 7 a.m. on May 31st. It was kind of odd at first. They had to like back down the epidural because I couldn't figure out the correct way to push. I felt like I was getting nowhere. And I think that was kind of just part of maybe being like a first time mom because I had no idea what it was supposed to feel like. I ended up really not pushing at first because everything was numb, but then I figured it out and I pushed for about an hour and a half, and at 8:44 in the morning on May 31st, this little munchkin was born. Say hi. I love you. And I also remember while I was pushing, they kept telling me, she has hair, she has hair. But I was just hoping she had a little bit of hair because I was a bald baby. And so Ben immediately when he saw, she was like, she has hair. And I also had a mirror shining down so I could see kind of what was happening too, which was super helpful actually. And I really enjoyed seeing that just because it was interesting, and it definitely motivated me to push more. And also when I was pushing, I was starting to really get tired. I should have said this a minute ago, but I was just exhausted at this point. And Ben was awesome. He put on some music, country music. He kept telling me like, good job and push, and he kept telling me, you're almost there, you're almost there. And he told me later that even though he knew I wasn't almost there, he was telling me that so I'd push harder, and it worked. I mean, he definitely knows me. I mean, Ben was awesome throughout that whole process. So she got here at 8:44 in the morning on May 31st, and she was just beautiful, of course, super healthy. This is a part where I don't really know what went on with Elodie. She was on my chest and everything was fine, but then they took her away from me to go get her dried up and get measurements and do all that stuff, and Ben went with her. Ben also did cut her cord, which I will try to include a little video of that in here. So he did get to do that, which was awesome. But then after that, he went with Elodie, which again was in the same room, but they had to focus on me because I went to push out my placenta and the cord snapped. So I guess the doctor had a hold of the cord, and when I went to push it out, she, I guess, was maybe pulling it to try and help me. And I just remember seeing it snap and blood splatter all over her. I was like, oh my gosh, and I felt really bad. So then she tried to help me get it out. They ended up having to bring in an ultrasound machine and another doctor, and basically the doctor had to go in and manually remove my placenta, which was incredibly painful. I remember the doctor standing there and telling me, I'm so glad you have an epidural, because if you did not, this would be just excruciating. So I'm definitely glad I had that. It was excruciating with the epidural. So that was quite interesting. Luckily they got everything. I did end up having a 2nd-degree tear that I needed stitches for. They did not do an episiotomy. It was just a natural tear. I'm not a very big person. I mean, Elodie wasn't a very big baby, but I had a 2nd-degree tear. She was actually 6 pounds, 2 ounces, so she was pretty tiny, but she was super healthy. We had no issues with her whatsoever. She was a little jaundiced, but she was getting better before we left, so she was fine. She never had to go under the light or anything. Because I did lose a lot of blood with having to get my placenta manually removed, I did end up fainting in the bathroom when I tried to take a shower. I just don't really remember any of that. I just remember sitting on the toilet trying to use the restroom for my first time after giving birth and fainting, and then ending up in a wheelchair somehow. So that happened, and they were keeping a close eye on me and had to give me some supplements because, and they did discuss with me having a blood transfusion because I had lost a lot of blood. Luckily though, I did not have to receive a blood transfusion. They kind of brought it to us and let us decide, and they said that my numbers were rising. They were just very, very slow, which is why they wanted to talk about the blood transfusion. But because they were rising, Ben and I opted to not get the blood transfusion. There are risks when you do that. So we decided against it, and luckily my numbers kept rising and I was fine. I just had to really make sure to take care of myself, and thankfully enough for Ben, he was amazing and he really took care of me and helped me out in every aspect. So I'm so, so grateful for him. And so 48 hours later, we left the hospital to come home and start our journey as a family of 3. But overall though, birthing on a military base was definitely an interesting process. It was definitely different than what I would have thought my birthing experience would have been before I met Ben, because I never would have thought I would be giving birth in a different country on a military base. But it was such a great memory. Overall, the care that I got there was great. I don't really have any complaints. I'm glad I kept to my word and really tried to get that epidural when I did. We now have this cutie pie. Can we take Wubs out? I love you. Now you're 6 months old, just like that. You're a big girl. So y'all, thank you so much for listening to this story. I feel like it might be a little jumbled up, and I apologize for that. It's really hard trying to remember all the different points that I wanted to tell in the story, and a lot happened, obviously. I really hope you enjoyed this story, and if you like this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, and please make sure before you leave to subscribe to my channel. I would love to have you a part of this community with me. And if you have any other videos that you're curious about or that you want me to do, please let me know down in the comments. I love doing videos that y'all ask for and getting feedback, so I really, really appreciate that. So thank you everyone for watching, and if you are delivering on a military base at any point in the future, good luck. And all I have to say is stay adamant, because they will sometimes not go your way, but if you say you want it, just stay with it and you got it. So thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. Bye. You want to say bye? Say bye. Mwah.
I lose my breath whenever I see you. You stole my heart, what is it that you do? My life was great till you added colors. Like the moon needs the sun, we don't care about the others. You set my